everybody. I'm Yeka and I'm here with Tom. He's here to share his success story with us. Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Pretty good.
So, tell us a little bit about your health issues before you were doing carnivore.
Um, well, the biggest issues for me were migraines, allergies, and just fluctuating weight. Some obesity, really. I'm about 165 now, and I would kind of go up to 220 or something like that and back down. I always struggle with that. And for the most part, they're the biggest things with me. I also had horrendous sugar cravings all my life. My whole family, it's a big joke with us. But so they're the things that really were the most significant issues before I started the carnivore way of eating.
Okay. And
And I had,
go ahead.
go ahead. Well, I was going to say, ever since I was even my early teens, I was just infatuated with the idea that I could eat to be healthier. You know, I remember the old phrase, you are what you eat. And I just believed that. And I was always experimenting with one thing or another. Even people probably don't remember, but I guess it was early 70s, there was the first iteration of the Atkins diet. And I read those books and I was fascinated by it. It was a high protein diet. It wasn't quite what it was later, but and I did that for a long time. And then I became obsessed with veganism. And I was a strict vegan. I would have brewer's yeast and spirulina in my late 20s, you know. Um, and I'd read everything. I was completely convinced. I mean, it was confirmation bias. You keep reading the same things and you read more and more about it. And it seems so obvious and so true. Um, so I did that for, I guess, maybe a couple of years, but I was a runner. I used to run a lot. And I realized that my running, I was just fatigued and I couldn't put my finger on it. I really wasn't sure what it was. And I thought, well, maybe I'm running too much now, but I hadn't really inched it up. And I was in my late 20s and I was in pretty good shape. So I remember finally I broke down and ate cheese. I said, I'm just going to eat some cheese. And I can't say I didn't really document it, but it seemed to get better after that. I could run again. And so I thought, well, vegetarianism, that's the way to go. And I did that for a couple of decades, I guess. And I have 6 kids. One of my daughters is still vegetarian because she grew up at that time. And again, confirmation bias, you read things about it. It all confirms what you read. And I was fanatic. I read, Francis Moore Lapay's book, Diet for a Small Planet. It all made sense. It all added up. And I think the first red pill moment was when I had a friend, a little older than I was, and he always had high blood pressure and coronary risk. And I ate breakfast with him one day. He was eating sausage and eggs. I said, what in the hell are you doing? And he told me about the Atkins book, the later Atkins book. And this is a guy who I respected. I mean, I knew he wasn't just crazy, but I couldn't get over that. It made no sense to me. I thought it was counterintuitive. You know what it really is? It's counter conditioning. We've been conditioned to believe certain things. We think they appear intuitive, right? So I read the book and I read it inside out and I read other books and I said, maybe there's something to this. I switched to an Atkins diet. I lost 45 pounds. I felt better. I realized suddenly I had something wrong because I felt so much better. My weight regulated. And I was around my late 40s at the time. So I had spent all my life basically looking back fairly misguided, but following the conventional wisdom as always, you know. And then I would dabble in and out of that. I'd gain weight and I'd get strict again. I'd gain weight and I'd get strict again. And then I tried the hip version, you know, the South Beach diet, which always worked. But, you know, the one thing I noticed, though, was in the first couple of weeks of those diets, they call the induction phase, there were no grains. I ate no grains. And I felt significantly better for those couple of weeks. And it was noticeable. And I mentioned it to my doctor once, and he just shrugged and said, well, maybe you're sensitive to the grains. And about that time, my wife told me about a friend on the paleo diet. So, you know, right away, I start researching the paleo diet. I said, this makes sense. I'm going to give this a try. And when I tried that, I felt better. Definitely felt better, you know. And I said, okay, the grains have been a bit of an issue for me, and the dairy too, probably. But I had really bad migraine headaches, problems with migraines and allergies and all for several years. And they only got worse. At one point, I thought I'd have to quit work. I couldn't even read things; they were so bad. Um, so I tried the paleo diet, did it for quite a while, and again, my mind starts wandering. And now I've been whatever you want to call it, red pilled or whatever. So now I'm getting a healthy skepticism. I'm like, okay, this makes sense, but maybe there's something else. Maybe what I've thought all along isn't necessarily true, right? This is what's happening with a lot of people. So I started reading about keto, and all I read was how dangerous this was. So dangerous. It's so dangerous, right? And these were the authorities. I mean, these people knew, you know? So I didn't want to gamble with that, but I kept reading about it. And finally, back in 2015, middle of 2015, I said, I'm going to dabble with this. And I did. And I had and I mountain bike, so I could really gauge my stamina and everything. And I realized that the first week or two, I really felt bad. But I made up my mind. I know I'm going to feel bad. I'll get through this. It didn't last that long, and that was the fat adaptation. I assume it was classic symptoms. And after that, it took a while. I couldn't get the instant burst energy, that really glycolytic energy. I couldn't whip it up when I needed it, and I knew that. But I kept reading, and I said, okay, this comes in time. It didn't take that long to get it back, and then actually after that, I have much more stamina. And of course, what I realized is I don't need snacks. I don't need to carry food around with me. I'm riding with guys that are much younger, and a lot of them need snacks, and every hour or so they're popping things. And I realized I didn't need it. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't need it at all, you know? So along the line, I'm always, scouting. And then I see this zero carb thing. And I go, that's freaking crazy, but I kept reading it. And then I saw the key thing for me, like a lot of people, was when Sean Baker was on the Joe Rogan podcast in 2017. And I watched that, and it made so much sense. And Sean challenged people to do the 30-day trial, right? And I'm a documenter. I kept track of everything, all kinds of details. And I put them in there. Well, after a few days being pure zero carb, the difference was significant. And I'd been feeling better all along. And honestly, every time along the way I dropped plants, I felt better. When I dropped them all, I felt great. And I was up in the mountains with my buddy, and we were riding over a rough part of the trail, and I'd been over it before, but I'd never made it through some parts, and I'm flying through it now. And I thought, this is so significant. And I told my wife, I said, I don't think I'm going back. Ironically, it was about a week before Christmas, and she had bought me a bread maker. Oh. And her face dropped, and right away I understood what had happened. So they still use it because they still eat bread, and I'd like them to eat at least, flourless bread. But I said, the difference is too significant. And it's been that way ever since, And I had cut my weight, just kept cutting weight with keto. And I was pretty thin. I wasn't very big bulk-wise even. But when I went on the carnivore diet, within days, I dropped about 5 pounds, which I assume is just water, because as thin as I was, but then I steadily came back up. I was down to like 147. I came steadily up to about 165, and it's like a rock. It doesn't matter how much or how little I eat. It's so steady. And one thing I really noticed is all the visceral fat's gone. I don't have a rounded belly anymore. But all the other things, the digestion issues, I was in the drugstore the other day, and I saw all the digestion, the laxatives and all these medicines for digestion. I looked at it and I thought, I haven't even thought about one of those things for 2 years. I've been doing this since a little over 2 years, 2.25 years, something like that. I've never even thought about something like that, And if you had told me 3 years ago that I wouldn't get scurvy and I didn't need fiber, who would have believed that, right? This is standard conventional wisdom. And it really, what it does, I think, at least for me, and I suspect for other people, it begins to open your mind to the possibility that there are lots of other things that we've been told and we believed, even outside this area, that at the very least, call for some skepticism, just healthy skepticism. And, this is a thing with Sean. I don't have the skin for what he does. I'm not thick-skinned enough to have people threaten my family and all this kind of thing, right? But what I like about it is he's encouraging skepticism. He's saying, hey, try it. He's not pushing dogma on people. And that appeals to people, especially in this day and age, because the internet has kind of opened a lot of people's minds up, much more so than even a decade ago, you know? So, how's that for a long answer to a short question?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Oh, that's amazing. And so when you first heard about carnivore, how did you start implementing it and what kind of foods were you eating?
Well, I'm always like go 100% or nothing because I wanted to know if it made a difference, right? So I ate beef, basically beef. Now, early on, I did eat some eggs, I ate some dairy, and I even dabbled every once in a while. I'd have a fat bomb that I had left over in the freezer. But pretty soon I dropped all that. And the dairy was a big difference too. I realized, and you know, as you know, this is a sort of an elimination diet. So when you get it down to the basics, it's really easy to pick out what's been bothering you instead of having this big mix and never knowing what's what. And I realized that the dairy was significant for headaches and things like that, you know. But I wanted to really challenge it, and I had had allergies, really bad allergy problems for years. The allergist I went to is an older woman. She said, "You know, you're the most allergic person I've ever tested." So that's good news. And so what I did is I taken Claritin and Flonase. It's a, or not Flonase, but a Zelestine. It's a nasal spray. I had taken them for decades to try to tamp down the headaches and symptoms. And I said, well, I'm feeling so good, I'm going to drop it. And I just dropped it. And the Claritin really took a long time to withdraw from, regardless of what they say about the half-life. It took months before I stopped itching all the time, but I was so determined. And when I realized how sort of addicted I was to that, I thought, I don't want any part of this. But that first hay fever season, my allergies weren't gone, but they were significantly, they were just much better than they'd been when I was taking medication. And I thought, well, this is a, you know, obvious trade-off. And I've never taken them again. I don't take any, I'm 67. I don't take any kind of medication. That was really all I took, but I don't take any now. And I just don't have joint issues, not, never. And I go to the gym. I mean, I work out in the gym 3 days a week or so. And I don't know. I think people think at this age, you're supposed to have joint problems or something. Now, you know, maybe I've jinxed it. When we hang up, I'll probably get a knee problem or something, but they feel good. They just don't feel bad, you know, and I work them. So.
Yeah, and so how long was it for your symptoms to go away, your migraines and your allergies to start going away?
Yeah, that's a good question. The migraines are pretty easy to, well, they went away pretty quickly. I mean, it didn't take long. I think they're like an immediate reaction to things I ate. So when I cleared those things out, I really didn't have a lot of, but I think it wasn't quite as good early on as it is now. I rarely have a headache, and when I do, it's very mild. They were daily, and more, you know, better or worse, but at least once a day, sometimes all day. That was quick. The allergies, hard to say because allergy season was a factor, right? So I couldn't gauge it. I had stopped the medicine. Well, let's see. Okay, I had been on the carnivore diet for about 4 to 5 months when allergy season came around. And I'd been off the meds for about a month and a half. But I noticed right away that first year was significantly better. And ironically, a lot of people I knew were saying it was a really bad year. And I thought I couldn't gauge it anymore because I wasn't reacting like I was, right? So I assume they're right, but I don't know. And the following year was the same. I can't say I don't have symptoms. There's some days when it's really bad, I'll sneeze a few times, but I don't get heavily congested. I don't really have headaches. I don't have sneezing fits. The big thing about allergies too, that I think if people don't have them, they don't realize you feel very lethargic and your mood is very depressed. You know, that's probably the worst part of it. Sneezing and all you can live with. But so I really had none of that after this. And you know, the funny thing is when people start this, they want to proselytize, right? They want to tell everybody and run and tell everybody. And I'm on the zero carb Reddit forum watching this. And I see that over time, people slow down a little bit and they say, well, if somebody wants to know, let them ask me, you know. But when people start out, they're amazed. I can't believe it. And they want to tell everybody. It's natural. And I was the same way. And now I've tried to learn to shut my mouth a little bit. And hey, other people don't do it. Maybe the price of meat doesn't go up too much, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so did you have any difficulties starting the carnivore diet?
Yeah, well, I have one. Of course, I was already fat adapted. I think that would have been an issue. I was prepared. I would have gone through it, but I would have had that. But I'll tell you, I had one issue, and this is one thing I caution people about. Um, I was eating so much fatty meat, and I had been because I've been on keto, right? But when this happened, I was getting such a kick out of it. I was texting my buddies, "Look at what I'm eating," and I piled on the fat. And my wife and my couple, two or three of the kids were here at the time, and they'd trim all the fat off their meat. I was shoving it all down. I was frying. I was cooking it. I was getting extra pieces of fat. Just eat tons of fat, and I ate way too much, and my body just wasn't ready for it, and that was painful. I'll leave it at that. And it was really painful. And that was a couple days there that I don't ever want to relive. And so whenever anybody says, "What do you, do you have any cautionary notes?" That's one I say, just eat. You want to eat a little more than normal. Of course, you want to eat as much as you can, and you want it to be fatty, but don't overdo it. Get a feel for how you adjust. That was a real blip, but it's the only one I've had. Everything else has been positive. I thought about this before we talked, and I can't think of anything that hasn't been positive. And so much, and some of it's even more, something I probably wouldn't share, but there's so many things in every way. They're just better, you know? And it seems universal. It seems, I've very rarely read anybody who says it hasn't been better, and the very few who do, when you look into it, maybe they were still, having dairy and some, having their coffee every day or something. Now I never drank a lot of coffee because I'm very sensitive to the caffeine. But early on, I said, I'm going to drop the coffee too. That had always been difficult for me. It's really easy now. I can almost just drop it I only drink a cup a day or so, maybe 12 ounces. But that's something I kind of pick up again and pick up again. But I just don't feel a strong need for it. My mind is clearer, no question. My energy is steadier, no question. So some of the things that the caffeine did for me, maybe that's part of it. It's just not as significant, So if I like it, I do it. And I just drink it black. I never have dairy or anything else. Very rarely even eggs. It's generally beef or lamb.
Oh yeah, I love lamb too.
I really like the lamb too. Yeah. Everybody says, "How can you eat just that? How boring is it?" But the truth is, when I'm hungry, that's all I want. I'm never bored with it. It's just it's conditioning again of some kind that we feel like we got to have different things. And there's such an emotional connection. And I realized that I had made all these fat bombs and they were in the freezer and I just wouldn't let them go. I kept looking at them and I was mourning them. And now they can put anything in front of me. I couldn't care less, but there's it's another transition. It's an emotional or psychological transition. It must be, Finally gave them to my neighbor, but it took months.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like there definitely is like a mourning period when you're transitioning, because you are essentially saying goodbye to the foods you used to love, and enjoy. But the trade-off is it's just, that much better, and I think when you switch to eating this way, your body gets so used to just eating for fuel and not for fun. So that's why
Yeah.
you crave just the meat.
Yeah. It is so tied up with our social life, our cultural background, our family life, right? I mean, you don't eat what they give you. For an older guy like me, they're like, he's crazy, let him go. But I think for younger people, especially when they're out with friends and things, I can imagine that would be hard, especially while you're transitioning into it and getting used to it. So it's understandable. But different cultures, you have to eat certain food, and so I'm no longer eating that one. I'm no longer eating that one, and but it's so funny. You can tell people all I eat is meat, right? And inevitably they say, "What about bread?" No. What about spinach? No. What about? And I feel like saying, "Well, what's not clear in that statement?" Right? Or you go to a restaurant and say, "Please, I only want what's cow." That's what I say. "Please, if it's not cow, don't bring it out." And they look down at the pad and they say, "How about mushrooms?" No. How about, this? How about this? And they tick off on, "What do you want for a side?" No. And then it comes out, if a burger comes out, still comes out with a bun and everything else, because it's just funny. We really don't hear what we hear. We hear what we think we hear, right? So, But, you know, that's the least of the issues, right?
Yeah, or they'll, if it doesn't come on a bun, they'll put it, even if you tell them you just want the patty, they'll still put it on a bed of lettuce. And then your burger tastes like lettuce.
Right. And
Yeah.
my friends or my wife, if they're with me, they all laugh and laugh and laugh because they know what's coming. And I'm as explicit as I can be. And sometimes I even say it's a food sensitivity thing. I'll fall on the floor and faint if you bring me something else. And they nod their head, and then here comes the bun, here comes the cheese, and here comes the, you know, whatever, the fries or whatever. So, but again, these are, you know, first world problems, right? They're not a big deal if you've
Yeah.
sort of recaptured your health. And you can feel like me. I went 6.5 decades really struggling in some ways, right? But I'm just happy to be here now. I couldn't care less about that, you know? And I think
Hmm.
honestly about my dad, he died a few years ago in his 90s, but he struggled with all the same things all his life. And I think how different his quality of life might have been. There's so many people who have type 2 diabetes and all these kinds of things, and they think it's a given, you know? But again, it's not, I know it's not our place to go out and cram it down people's throats, but I hope that people at least will just be skeptical a little bit and say, hey, I'll really give something different a try and see what happens. That's all, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. And so could you just do a recap of all the benefits that you've seen since you've been doing carnivore?
Um, well, aside from symptoms going away, which are the really significant things for me, allergies, um, really mild or almost gone. My weight is so stable, it's a joke. I can eat, you know, half the furniture in the house if I want to, but my weight doesn't budge hardly. I can manipulate it a little bit. I get a few pounds up, a few pounds down. Um, my digestion is, I never have a problem with my digestion. I haven't in 2 years, except for that one first round with it where I ate too much fat, you know. So my digestion is much better. Some skin problems I had, and I have very sensitive skin, have very little issue with it anymore. I really don't put much on my skin anymore. I don't use a lot of soap or anything. It just doesn't feel, I don't feel like I need it. In terms of stamina, my stamina is better than it's been, and particularly right now, I'm just, uh, at least since my 30s. There's no question. And as far as weights in the gym, I record everything. So um, I, in the gym, I got much stronger, no question. And in fact, I was stronger than I was because I used to go to the same gym in my early 40s. Even then, I know my lifts and they're higher than they were then. So all those things have changed. Libido and things like that, way up. I mean, you know, you read this all the time, and I've never taken anything, steroids or anything like that. I've been a little afraid of it. So I don't take any kind of supplements. I don't take any kind of vitamins. I just beef, a little bit of salt and water. That's it, you know? And it's amazing. And people say, well, you know, some people could do well on that, but I think some people need, you know, plants or something like that. And I always think, if it's the case, there's about 10 million species on Earth, right? Give or take, depending on how they categorize them. If it's the case that one species needs to eat totally different kinds of foods, we're the only one in 10 million. So it seems more likely that there's a species appropriate diet. And it seems more likely that, you know, just given evolutionary window of time, that it's probably the one that people ate until at least a few thousand years ago. So I don't know. That's the way I see it. Maybe tomorrow I'll look at it differently. Hopefully, I tell my kids all the time, don't believe anything more than 80%. If you find yourself believing something more than 80%, you better investigate the contrary claim and make absolutely sure, right? Because you're starting to get confirmation bias. You're starting to read what you already believe, and you're convinced. So I don't know. I'm Irish. I like healthy skepticism.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And you look really healthy and you look great for your age. And I'm so
Thank
happy
you.
you found this way of eating. Also, how long have you been doing carnivore for now?
Uh, well, let's see, 2 years and 3 months.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. It was right after Sean's Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, okay.
And I did a little thing for the carnivore training system. So he and my wife and I video chatted just recently.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I
Oh, are you
correspond with him. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
awesome. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. That's fine.
No, I corresponded with him a little bit before he was famous, you know. So
That's
that's been,
awesome.
but
Yeah,
I
well,
hope
thanks again for sharing.
for.